Gamescom is over, I am back home, and it's time to get back into the usual business. Today we're gonna take a look at one of the new upcoming tags of patch 1.81, the TAM, also known as the Tanque Argentino Mediano. During Gamescom 2018, I was fortunate enough to be able to be one of the first people to play this new tank in a very early stage. That said, do keep in mind that anything you might see in this video is very early stuff and might be subject to change. That said, I have a good feeling about this tank and I don't think too much else is going to change. In any case, the TAM is going to be a new researchable rank 6 light tank in the German tech tree. Preliminarily at least, it is at a build rating 9.0. What this thing essentially is a combination of the Marder infantry fighting vehicle chassis and the Leopard I turret and gun. The gun in particular is a 105mm L7 derivative, which is stabilized indeed and has access to APF-SDS as a researchable shell, much like the Leopard I A1A1. Besides the main gun, you also have a 7.62mm coaxial machine gun, as well as another 7.62mm machine gun on the top of the turret. This tank started production in 1979 and was a joint project between the Argentinian government and engineers and Germans. There are a couple of other variants of this platform. One carries a 155mm howitzer and another one carries a 20mm Rheinmetall RH202 20mm cannon, as you can find on the Kampfpanzer 70 and the MT 70 for example. But those are not in the game, they might never come. Let's talk about the TAM. In terms of armor, well, the TAM is a light tank, so armor is pretty much non-existent. The thickest plate you really have is about 30mm thick, which isn't really going to save you from anything at this tier. Even SPAA can cut straight through you. Although to note is that there is a rather high slope on the upper frontal plate, which might bounce shots. Keep in mind, on Gamescom we were playing against bots, so I have no idea if it actually will be able to. But if Leopard 2K is anything to go by, just because the armor is thin doesn't mean it is completely useless. The tank is configured to have the turret in the back and the engine in the front, and it's a rather large engine for this chassis as well. This might mean one of two things. If the tank does not suffer from hull break, which I do not yet know if it will or if it will not, the engine might actually be able to add as additional armor by eating up shots, especially heat shells and hash shells. However, if the tank does suffer from hull break, then this engine is also going to be a massive weak spot, since any shot into this rather large target inside of the tank is going to result in a one-shot kill. In terms of overall survivability, if it doesn't get hull break, it's actually not too bad. You do have 4 crew, 1 driver in the front of the hull and 3 crew in the turret. And whilst from the front, since the tank is rather narrow, it's likely going to result in one-shot kills anyways, even without hull break. If you present the side of the tank, there is a decent amount of empty space and empty area, which might have APF-SDS shells and HFS shells just pass straight through without doing any significant damage. Now, what is the mobility of this thing like, given that it is a light tank? You'll be glad to hear that this tank is indeed better in terms of mobility than the Leopard I A1. Whereas the Leopard I A1 has a horsepower per ton power to weight ratio of 19.6, the TAM has a ratio of 23.6 horsepower per ton once fully upgraded. In terms of speeds, it does say 75 km per hour top speed on the stat card, but I found that it only goes up to about 45 to 50 km per hour, at least on the test drive. Although interestingly enough, it also goes the same speed backwards. It can go as fast backwards as forwards. Additionally to that, the hull is also capable of neutral turning. In terms of firepower, we already know that this tank will come with a 105mm cannon and 2 7.62mm machine guns. The cannon has pretty much the same characteristics as on the A1A1, and I mean literally copy-pasted, given that it's pretty much the same turret, just with a little bit less armor. It has a top reload time of 6.7 seconds with a fully upgraded crew. It has stock APDS, which could be an issue at this battle rating, although it does have options for hash, heatfs and APF-SDS, same as on Leopard A1A1 currently. The gun is indeed stabilized, and the stabilizer is actually pretty damn decent, not gonna lie. You are not going to have too much trouble shooting targets on the move or quickly reacting to enemies. The gun handling does have some things to leave desiring, namely the gun depression is worse than on the Leopard I. It only goes up to -7 degrees to +18 degrees, meaning that you don't have much range in vertical travel for the gun. The turret itself does turn decently well, but it's not really top tier MBT levels, with a 24 degree per second turret rotation speed. So, looking at the overall stats of the tank, what I've felt so far playing this thing for about half an hour. This tank, the TAM, is essentially a faster Leopard I, A1, but with scouting. Yes, given that it is a light tank, it does actually have scouting abilities, which can be quite useful to your team. Now, as I mentioned before, I do not know yet if this tank will suffer from hull break or not. It will probably suffer from hull break, and in that case it will have pretty much absolutely no survivability, given that the engine is absolutely huge, and critical damage to the engine will destroy the tank. But at the same time it's also more mobile than Leopard I, and it has a slightly smaller profile. The height of the tank is about the same, but the TAM is decently shorter, I think a meter or two shorter, and is slightly narrower as well. This is of course aided by the gun being mounted so far back, which shortens the overall length of the tank. And this is despite the hull having a rather tall appearance, but I did double check, they do have about the same height. Now in terms of the gun, this is where it's a bit complicated. Stock, the TAM is probably not going to be all that great, given that the stock shell is APDS, and APDS at 9.0 isn't really the greatest shell to be carrying around, especially when you go up against T64s, M1s, stuff like that. Although the M1 Abrams is now 10.3, so disregard that, but T64s, T62Ms, the upcoming T55AM, all those things. At the same time, you do have access to APF SDS. It is a tier 4 upgrade, most likely, like on the Leopard A1, but the APF SDS shell does massively upgrade the performance of this tank. And keep in mind that this is a light tank, it is faster than a Leopard. It is still not quite as fast as Leopard 2K, but it can move around and it can exploit flanks perhaps. And of course use the scouting ability when you are not actively engaging. Of course, one of the major problems I can see happening with the TAM is the limited gun depression, and you are going to be struggling getting your gun on target whilst trying to crest a hill, especially since you are going to be exposing your massive engine. But given that you also have a smaller profile, you might have a higher chance of actually pulling that off without being spotted. And of course, since the tank does have scouting abilities, once again, you don't even need to expose yourself. You can just sit behind a hill and spot enemy tanks for your team using binoculars. So what do I predict for the TAM? Now keep in mind again, this is based on very early looks and stats of the tank. Things might change, ammo loaders might change, stats might change. I don't know. We'll have to wait for the upcoming dev server to find out more. But from what I've played and from what I know about the Leopard 1 playstyle and pretty much the RE251 as well, given that this tank is very similar to an RE251 really, but in a tech tree version and much higher tier, I'm actually expecting pretty great things, not gonna lie. The TAM fits in a spot somewhere in between the Leopard A1 and the Leopard 2K. It doesn't really have the armor, mobility or firepower of the 2K. The 2K is a vastly superior tank, of course, but it does have scouting abilities. At the same time, it is overall a better alternative to the Leopard A1. It is faster, it has the same gun performance, it is slightly sneakier, and once again it does have scouting abilities and reduced spawn point costs, given that it is classified as a light tank. At the same time, however, unlike the A1, it is probably going to be suffering from a hull break, and it's also much more vulnerable to SPAA fire given the very thin armor. This is the kind of tank that could definitely become great in the right hands, given the amazing mobility and powerful gun, but at the same time is probably not going to be very user-friendly if you don't really know the playstyle. This isn't a very forgiving tank, but this is a very enabling tank. Overall, I do believe the TAM is another very strong backup to a nation that arguably already has the strongest top-tier lineup, especially now with the premium Leopard 1A. I'll call it 1A6, it's not really a 1A6, but you get what I mean. Premium Leopard 1 with 120mm gun coming. Yeah, Germany is looking very strong at the top tier, not gonna lie. It is looking very, very strong. At the same time, I'm not really expecting high win rates for this thing. Once again, because of the launch of the 120mm Leopard 1 Premium, If the XM1 spam was anything to go by, given that people can simply skip all of the grind and buy their way to top tier tanks, whilst not having really done anything else in the game, yeah, I don't expect the team quality to be all that great. Although, let's be fair, just before I started recording, Gaijin did announce a new mechanic that will force new players to play arcade mode instead of being able to straight jump into realistic mode with their newly bought top tier tank. So maybe it's going to be at least not that bad as it was with the XM1 spam, but I'm not really holding out too much. Essentially, this is what I'm trying to say. If you're currently thinking about buying the 120mm Leopard I or any of the top tier tanks, the XM1, the T55 AM, and you don't already have tier 5 tanks or tier 6 tanks and you don't know the playstyle, please don't. Like, this is not even me asking you for not encouraging this behavior even more. It's really just a case of you wasting your money because you're not going to have fun playing these tanks. Trust me. The gameplay between tier 3s, 4s, 2, and the gameplay at top tier is completely different. You're essentially going to be paying $60 to get your ass handed to you by the elite community, so try and play the game normally, try and get up to tier 5, get familiar with the playstyle before you buy any of the new top tier tanks, because it's going to be much easier to play, and you're going to have some backups as well. And I know this was supposed to be a TAM video, but I just had to go off on a tangent because it's not really worth a video by itself. In any case, lads, this has been my quick little preview of the Tanque Argentino Mediano. Once again, this is all very early stuff, so don't read into the stats too much. Things might change. In fact, since there have been a lot of dev blogs lately, I have a feeling that the dev server is going to be public in the next couple of weeks, and if I will be around, I will be of course streaming it and testing the TAM once again. But until then, I want to know your opinion. What do you think of the TAM? Do you think it's going to be replacing the Leopard A1A1? Are you going to be putting it in your lineup even in top tier tanks, given that it does have scouting abilities and is in every way superior to the RE251? And do you really think that an Argentine tank, well, technically Argentine tank, has any place in the German tech tree? Also, what do you think about the two new top tier premium tanks, the T55 AM and the Leopard I 120mm? I might be taking a look at them when I get the chance, but I kind of want to do the same thing with the XM1, just flat out refusing to play those things. But that's going to be it for today. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video. As always, my name is MikeGoesBoom, and thank you for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find